it is the one and only Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thank you so much for joining me, man. This is fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time.
Tyrik, thanks for having me.
Of course, absolutely. So you're running for president, and you're running, and one thing that really struck me was that you're actually running as an independent and not a Democrat. So tell me, what was that? Well, first, before we get to that, tell me, what was that pivotal moment that took place when you said, I'm gonna step in this race, I'm gonna run for president?
The pivotal moment happened because there's a pollster called Jeremy Zogby who runs one of the big polling houses in this country. And I never knew him, but without my knowing it, he was polling me. So, normally when somebody hires you to do a poll and a politician, they'll give you maybe 22 questions you get. And if they didn't use all of their questions, he put my name in there. And the results that he was getting were very surprising. And he sent me an email saying, I need to show you these polling results. And when he came over to my house where I live in California, he showed me these numbers that made it clear that I had a pathway where I could win. And I showed them to my wife, and we talked about it for probably 6 months. And then she said, yeah, I'm on board.
Wow. Okay. So you got wifey's approval.
Yeah, I had to get that.
For sure, most definitely. So tell me, obviously, your dad, your uncle, part of the Democratic Party, right? And you're running as an independent. So why did you decide to run as an independent candidate?
Yeah, I wanted to run as a Democrat, and I began this race in the Democratic Party, and I was the last one in my campaign, in the upper echelons of my campaign, to agree that we had to switch to independent. It was heartbreaking for me to leave the party that I was raised in. The party, my family have been in Democratic politics for 3 generations. My great-grandfather was the first Irish Catholic mayor of Boston, and then, my uncle, President Kennedy, was in Congress, the Senate, the first Irish Catholic president of the United States. And so, I grew up in the party, and it was almost unthinkable that I would leave. But my campaign manager at the beginning was Dennis Kucinich. And he said at the very beginning, the Democrat Party is never going to let you be the nominee, and they're not going to give you a fair election. And then we saw them start to rig the rules in ways that I found shocking. So that, for example, the first big rule change they made was that they said that any political candidate who steps into the state of North Carolina cannot get any delegates from North Carolina. So even if I won North Carolina, all my delegates would go to President Biden. And since then, they've actually shut down a lot of the primaries. They're not going to let an actual election happen. And, when I realized that, it was rigged in a lot of other ways, too, that are complex. They had superdelegates that would make sure that that President Biden couldn't lose. So at that point, when it became clear to me that there is nothing I could do to win, I decided to leave the party and go independent.
Wow, so that was that pivotal moment. Okay, so tell me this, right? You talked a little bit about President Biden. Let's talk a little bit about the Republican side. There's a lot of Republican candidates. Who do you see yourself going up against? Who do you think? I know they say Trump is the front runner, then you got DeSantis, Haley, but who do you think you're going to be up against?
I'm assuming, I don't know any more than you do, Tyrik. I read the polls, and it seems pretty clear to me that my most likely opponents are going to be President Biden and President Trump. My polling now, it shows me with the highest favorability rating among all of them. So my favorability rating in the Gallup poll that came out yesterday was at 52. President Trump's at 42, President Biden's at 41. I beat both President Trump and President Biden among young people under 45 years of age, and I beat them among independents, which is now the biggest political party. And I still have 10 months to the election. So I feel very optimistic about where we're headed.
Got it. Okay. And you're here in Atlanta, and yesterday you actually did something. You did, I think it was like a roundtable with Black women or something to that extent. So tell us what was that like, and what were the highlights of that?
Well, I've been coming to Atlanta a lot. The Black voters are a key demographic for me. I've spent 35 years working on economic, small business in the Black community and education issues, et cetera. It's a long time issue for my family. It's a big issue for me. And Atlanta is a key city. So we've come back here repeatedly. We met yesterday. Angela Stanton King, who's a member of the King family, put together an astounding group of very, very successful Black female entrepreneurs, athletes, local leaders, and we had a panel that was, to me, very, very exciting.
Okay, got it. And so tell me, right, like this is the Black Information Network on iHeartRadio, and so obviously our audience is predominantly Black people. So why on election day should African Americans wake up and head to the polls and vote for you?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. What I would say is that people have trouble trusting any politician. I've never been a politician. I never intended to run for president. And if you look at what I've done over the past 40 years of my life, so much of it has been about achieving the vision my uncle had, my father had, that Martin Luther King, who they worked with, had for this country, is to make us a true participatory constitutional democracy with true equal opportunity for people of all color. My first case, I'm predominantly known as an environmental lawyer. My first case was representing NAACP against the village of Austin, which is a Hudson Valley village. I learned at that point that about the issue of environmental justice, that 4 out of every 5 toxic waste dumps, and that's what we were suing over, is in a Black neighborhood. The highest concentration of toxic waste dumps in this country is the south side of Chicago. The most contaminated zip code in California is East LA. The biggest toxic waste dump in America is in Emile, Alabama, which is 85% Black. And if you look at all of these obnoxious facilities, the sewer plants, waste haulers, waste transportation facilities, and the factories that are spewing the most toxic chemicals, they happen to be mainly in Black communities. So I spent a lot of my 40-year career representing those communities against big corporate polluters. In addition to that, I took my father's place on the seat on the board of Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration, which is a community development corporation that has brought economic empowerment into the Black community. In one of the poorest communities in Brooklyn, which is now flourishing, which is Bedford-Stuyvesant, make sure that capital is available because those are capital-starved communities. They're communities that can't get home improvement loans, they can't get house loans, they can't get business loans. And that's why we have crime in the Black communities, because there is no availability of capital. There are no other options. And that reason, and education systems. We have a broken education system in this country, and the major victims of that are Black communities. And what I've fought for is charter schools and school choice. We have a school in New York, Success School, that's a charter school, which is a public school with 20,000 kids in it, and they have almost 99% graduation rate in college placement. Better college placement than the best white high schools in New York, Scarsdale High School. And what they've shown is that poor performance in school and good performance in school has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with culture. It has nothing to do with economic opportunity. It is 100% related to the quality of that school. And if we give our African American children good schools, they're going to perform well throughout their careers. And that's what we need. A lot of sort of liberal ideology today is about ending racism by either canceling people or trying to make sure that, people are educated and conscious of things that they may say or do that may have racist implications. And that is important, but we're never going to abolish racism. Racism is part of who we are. We're tribal people. We're biologically hardwired for it. And the best way to overcome the impacts of racism are to give children confidence, to give them opportunity, to give them good educations, to give them good role models, to give them communities where they exercise sovereignty and they're in control. When I was a little boy, there was tremendous, my uncle was running for president, first Irish Catholic president. There was tremendous backlash, and there was a lot of anti-Catholic feeling in our country, and I was called all kinds of names when I was growing up. I was called mackerel snatcher and Mick and these other names that were supposed to be derogatory toward Catholics. I never took any of them to heart. My attitude was, if somebody said something like that to me, is that they've got a problem, and I didn't internalize that hatred and that criticism because I was equipped. I had a good education. I was given opportunities. I knew that I was going to do something good with my life. And so those kind of barbs and slings could not hurt me internally. And that is the place that we want our Black children to occupy, a place where, when they do run into inevitable racism, it's not going to affect them, because they're going to be confident enough about themselves and their own futures and their families and their communities that they understand that the person who's slinging that at them is the person with the problem.
Got it. Okay. And you said you definitely did say a lot there. And one thing that you did talk about was you talked about in the Black communities, there's not a lot of capital, stuff like that, good schools and stuff. So if you do win the election, you get into office, what does that first 100 days look like fixing those issues?
I mean, one of the big issues in Black neighborhoods is the institutions have been destroyed. So there's no community hospitals anymore, which means healthcare is substandard because you're going out of your community to a hospital where people don't know you and where they're controlled by a hedge fund and they're looking at you as a commodity. And that's why we lost. One of the reasons why Blacks suffered so badly during COVID, Blacks were dying at the highest rate of anybody in our country. They were locked in these hospitals with no access even to their family, nobody to watch over them and make sure that the medical care was actually, good. But also, these communities are redlined. The banks aren't loaning money. We've destroyed all the community banks in this country. We've destroyed the Black-owned credit unions. We've destroyed the heart of with Black Wall Street was absolutely destroyed in Tulsa because of racism, because people did not want Black economic empowerment. And what we need to do is to start by creating infrastructure. We need Black banks. There's only 20 Black-owned banks in this country. And right now, if you're Black and you make money, it's leaving your community. We need that money to stay in that community. And we need the Black banks that do exist to be flooded with capital. And the Fed is starving them of capital. And that's one of the things that I'm going to do is make sure that those banks are capitalized and that money then trickles down into the Black community.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you definitely sharing that. Definitely appreciate you taking time to stop by, talk with Black Information Network. And before we leave, go ahead and give everybody your website where they can check out your policies and all that stuff.
Yeah, we need to get to 7,000 signatures here in Georgia. We love your help. If you go to Kennedy24.com, if you send us $5 even, or volunteer, we will put you to work.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kenny. I appreciate your time.